If you've ever watched any professional baseball game closely, you might have noticed this odd ritual that pitchers have with their baseballs. It's a practice that's equal parts superstition as well as actual science that aims to avoid any more accidental deaths. But how could something as simple as a dirty baseball lead to such high stakes? Well, this is an official baseball crafted by Rawlings for the 2024 MLB season. But there's a catch. This ball is unplayable as is. It's too new, too clean, too unloved. Before it can be part of one of the nearly 150 baseballs used in every official game, this ball needs to be rubbed down in an incredibly specific way with an incredibly specific and secret mud, whose location is a well-guarded secret known only to 5 people here in South Jersey. Except, well, I guess me now. It's not that hard to find, guys. But how did it come to this? Why this specific mud? And what makes this secret mud so indispensable that no other substance tried has been able to replace it? Well, hi, my name is Edinger, and today we're going to be unraveling just that, the secret mud behind every single baseball game. And as always, subscribing is appreciated. Have you ever held a brand new baseball straight out of the box? This is a question for Americans and Canadians, as I don't think many Brits have. The ball is smooth, shiny, and even with the nice red stitching, is still incredibly slippery. Not exactly ideal when pitchers need precise control over every throw that could mean the difference between a strikeout and a home run.
Trevor Bauer not very happy.
This is what they do.
He's not shooting a testimonial for the toughness of that ice chest.
If you've never watched a professional baseball game, you might not know just how much precision these pitchers have. Pitchers have managed to find a way of making it look like they are pitching the same exact throw based on their arm position, where it is in their hand, their windup, and the only difference is halfway to the batter's box when the ball finally breaks free from its path and either goes outside the strike zone, inside the strike zone, or directly down the middle. But achieving this level of precision isn't just about skill. It's also about finding the perfect grip on the baseball. And this has been a problem that players have been attempting to solve since the game's creation. In the early days, players tried everything to solve this problem, from rubbing their balls with dirt and spit to even more unsavory substances like tobacco juice, shoe polish, and licorice. Though, I guess that's only unsavory if you're not from Scandinavia, so. These methods were messy, inconsistent, and oftentimes pretty damaging to the ball. Plus, because of the inconsistency, you'd oftentimes have teams wind up having an unfair advantage over other players because they developed different techniques for grippier balls. Was one happy dog with his ball. But worse than unfair advantages, there was also a death involved. Because there was no standard set, some players back in the day actually specialized in how messed up they could make the ball. Using a combination of things like spit and Vaseline jelly, it would make the balls behave very erratically. And fellas, don't you hate it when your balls behave erratically? I know, right? Either way, this is actually where the term spitball comes from. The more you know. In a now infamous game in 1920 against prolific spitballer Carl Mays, Cleveland shortstop Ray Chapman took a pitch to the head. And the sound was so loud of the ball cracking against his skull that the pitcher actually thought it had been hit by the bat. So he fielded the ball and threw it to first base before realizing what had happened. Ray Chapman was rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead the next day. And to date, this has been the only death on field in Major League Baseball. After Chapman's untimely death, the MLB started trying to find a way to improve player safety, and their first idea was to immediately ban spitballs from Major League use. ... Unless you were famous for them as a pitcher. Then you could keep doing it until you retire, but no new spitballers were allowed. But the issue of inconsistent texture of the baseball continued to be a thing for another decade, until one Lena Blackburne came up with a very strange solution. You see, with all the varied methods that players would come up with as a way to add grip to the ball, each came with its own set of caveats, the biggest of which meaning it would make the ball darker, thus harder to see. Great for pitching a strikeout, but such as in the case of Ray Chapman's untimely death, just a little bit too dangerous. And so one Philadelphia coach, the third base coach for the Philadelphia Athletics, came up with an interesting solution to this problem he referred to as his magic mud. When rubbing baseballs with the mud found around his home in Palmyra, New Jersey, near a tributary of the Delaware River, Blackburne found that only a small finger's amount of mud would successfully remove the initial slippiness of baseballs, as well as, most crucially, not discoloring the ball too much. This is all you need. Lovely. Due to a very specific geological mix of high clay content in the mud, which is quite rare for the area, as well as more brackish water from a nearby tributary, the mud at Blackburne's secret spot proved to be even more creamy of a texture compared to others he'd tried. And describing mud as creamy is not something I ever thought I'd be doing, but here we are. Blackburne brought back some of his treated baseballs to his players, who couldn't initially tell the difference just by looking at them, but they could definitely tell which balls had his secret mud on them just by grabbing them. God damn it. Once word got round that the Philadelphia Athletics were using this secret mud, well, every team in the MLB was clamoring to get their hands on some, until the 1950s when it was pretty much standardized. If you've ever watched a game where a player hits his first ever career home run, you might find it odd to see that when he gets back to the dugout, the rest of his team ignores him.
Nobody getting up.
Silent treatment from his teammates, his first home run.
Just silent treatment. High-fiving invisible people there.
Hey, huddle up. This is even worse.
Players also ignore their pitcher and refuse to engage with him at any point in the game if he is currently pitching a no-hitter. Also, when players leave a dugout to head to the field, they skip over the foul line to avoid touching it. Step on a crack, break your mother's back. Step on a foul line, home run, not this time. Dumb. You see, if there's one thing you need to know about baseball, it's that it is a game that's entrenched in ritual, tradition, and superstition. And if you find out that a rival team is using some weird technique you don't even half believe in, but it seems to be working, you better be getting that technique on your team. So once every team adopted Blackburne's magic mud, they'd be pretty hard-pressed to be talked out of it. Maybe there's a new thing. Maybe this new thing is better. So you try it out, but ooh, you threw a bad game. Well, it's definitely the new thing's fault. Did you throw off the vibes? No. The specific mud? No bad vibes there. Back to the specific mud. I don't know how it works, but I know that it works. Don't mess with the vibes. Fast forward to the current day, and not only is Blackburne's magic mud still in use, but it's actually required to be used in an incredibly specific way. Each and every ball needs to be rubbed for a minimum of 30 seconds on the same day that it is to be used in an MLB game. And they can be rubbed no sooner than 3 hours before gameplay commences. Now, given that there are about 13 dozen balls used per game on average, that works out mathematically to about 50 minutes of time spent just rubbing balls. Pre-mudded balls must be stored in humidors, and mudded balls must be stored in ball bags at a maximum of 8 dozen per ball bag. There are just so many rules, all revolving around pretty much how to keep these balls just the right amount of dirty, which is kind of like the inverse Axe/Lynx commercial. You might be wondering how it's been nearly 100 years since the discovery of the magic mud, and yet nothing more modern has been found. Well, it's not been for lack of trying. The MLB have been trying desperately to find a more synthetic and uniform solution, but each and every one has faced major setbacks. And it does make sense for them to be looking for an alternate solution, by the way, because their current solution, well, it just relies on too many outside factors. 1. It relies on weather conditions to be perfect to produce the perfect type of mud. 2. It relies on one guy with a secret spot, and this one guy pretty much has a monopoly on the situation. More on that later. And 3. It relies on hours upon hours of rubbing dozens and dozens of balls in a very specific way that doesn't necessarily result in a uniform grip. The MLB partnered with Rawlings, or Rollings for non-muggles, who produce all of their official baseballs to come up with a ball that was ready to go with the perfect amount of grip right out of the factory gates. However, this proved to be way more difficult than they imagined. Despite years of testing, developing numerous prototypes, and trying to synthesize the perfect grip, nothing was as perfect to fit. Some players would say that these new prototype balls were just too tacky, while others would say the same balls were not tacky enough. If you can imagine, it's pretty darn hard to get 100 different pitchers across 30 different MLB teams to all agree on the texture of the balls they want to play with. And this is especially true if it's different to something that has a strong tradition to it, one that, if you think about it, every player has been used to since they started playing baseball. Saying to players, we'd like to change out the mud, or rather the grip or texture that this magic mud allows, is pretty much akin to saying, we're going to change the size of the baseball. It kind of changes the sport. I mean, one pitcher said, it's not just about the grip, it's about the game. And in a sport where tradition runs deep, that's no small thing. I kind of agree. In my opinion, modern baseball scientists will one day crack the code and be able to figure this out, especially considering the future of the secret mud operation is coming into question. Now at this point you might be wondering, Evan, who is this mud man? Well, the current mud man is Jim Blintliff. Before him, it was his father. Before him, it was his father-in-law who was tasked by Lena Blackburne himself to continue on the mud harvesting business. And Jim plans to keep it within the family. Imagine like your dad being like, son, it's time I introduce you to the family business. We're going to dig some mud. Dad, I want to be an actor. I want to be a chef, Dad. Why don't you ever support me? You know the money's in the mud business, son. You gotta keep digging the mud. Now, I did mention that this guy does have a monopoly on the whole situation. I mean, only a few people know about the mud, and it has to be this specific mud. So you might be thinking that along with being filthy from the mud, Jim is probably also filthy stinking rich, especially considering each of the tubs of mud that he sells to the Major League Baseball teams costs up to $100 a tub for mud. But they only need to sell 4 tubs per team per year, and there are only like 30 teams, so at the end of the day, it works out mathematically to about $12,000 a year. I don't know if you're in the same country I am. You're probably not. I live in the UK now. But the cause he lives, cost of living crisis, is a bit hard. So I don't know if he's making a living off this mud as much as you think he is. So if he's only making $12,000 a year, he's clearly not doing it for the paycheck. Both he and his wife have worked lots of odd jobs through the years to actually afford them to live in New Jersey. It's quite an expensive state. But they continue their work with the mud as tradition. Also, I do just want to clarify so I don't sell him short. It's not like Jim is just going out here, scooping up some mud and then putting it in a tub and slapping his brand name on it and charging $100 a tub. No, he's actually taking it back, filtering out some of this stuff, aging it like wine to make sure that the mud is just right. I should get off this log. Hui! The fact that there's so much tradition just baked into this whole situation just makes the whole thing feel more wholesome. Honestly, it kind of makes me feel like maybe we shouldn't be actively seeking a synthetic solution. Well, maybe it's not so binary, but at least it muddies the waters a bit, you know? You know this is where the magic mud is made? No. This is where they make the magic mud for every baseball game. Here's a fun fact of the day. No problem. You have a nice day. That's right, when I'm in America, I talk to people. But if this muddy tradition with baseball comes to a close, it's not exactly the end of the mud business for the Blintliff family, who also provide this magic mud to American football teams, because who can't use a little bit more mud? And Blintliff is currently training his youngest daughter to take up the muddy torch when he moves on. So the act of harvesting this mud for sports will probably go on in the near future. But only time will tell whether or not one day Rawlings develops a mudless ball that all players can agree upon. Maybe one day in the future, people will look back on this as just a really weird fun fact about a tradition that baseball used to have. Until then, the tradition lives on from here in South Jersey to all over the US. Or, well, because it's the World Series, I guess, all over the world of the US and Canada, where I filmed this video. Hope you enjoyed all the shots. Baseball diamonds, or baseball fields, are actually quite rare in the UK. So here I am in London at a cricket pitch / football pitch. I didn't want to go all the way to Finsbury Park. If only changing my location were as easy as changing my browsing location, with today's video sponsor, NordVPN. Just this week, I was actually helping my friend out use NordVPN to get around a certain website's rules, trying to tell us, sorry, EU visitors only. Excuse me? With one tap of a button, I've just changed my browsing location. Now who's an EU visitor, all right? Regeln sind nur Empfehlungen. Plus, using NordVPN was incredibly useful for me to research all the stuff for this video by getting myself some US-related search results for all the baseball-related things. And it was also useful at keeping my traffic safe while I was traveling throughout the States and Canada to avoid those Canadian governmental prying eyes. And hey, with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee, you might as well try it out. And if you do, make sure to use nordvpn.com/Evan, because if you use that link, only that link, you actually can get a huge discount on a 2-year plan, plus a little something something. So thanks NordVPN for sponsoring, and without further ado, let's wrap this up. Depressing weather, innit? Recently, I've been putting a lot more time into my research, my writing, my titles, and everything with this, so thank you so much for all of your appreciation. And if you in particular liked the editing style, please comment some love for my friend Kim, who has been editing these videos for the last year tirelessly to bring her Welsh spice to my videos through the edit. So big up, Kim. Otherwise, if you're interested in knowing the aviation secrets hidden behind a Walmart just down the road from here, you can click to watch my video on that here. I'll see you there. Goodbye. That's a wrap. That's a wrap. That's a wrap. That's a wrap. the f is that? Oh, mud.